Chapter 4: Secrets. With the harrowing shadows of the night now receding, Burke and I could at last forge our introductions to the enigmatic Willard. After a short meal, he introduced us to a new denizen of the swamp, his personal companion, and also his steed. A large conical beak heavy, forcing the creature's head forward, supported by a sinewy neck that arched high above its sturdy body. It moved on all fours, its front limbs covered in short feathers, robust and thrusting powerfully into the earth. The creature's hindquarters, anchored by muscular upper legs, narrowed sharply into long, slender appendages. A fish squirmed frantically in its beak, desperately trying to escape its fate as the next meal. With an effortless tilt of its beak skyward, the beast's cavernous maw engulfed the fish whole. Secured to the creature's feathery back was a long, rugged saddle, crafted more for durability than ease. The creature moved through the swamp with fluid grace, its elongated limbs conjuring strides that spanned 5 times the length of a man. As the city loomed ahead, we dismounted, bidding farewell to the beast. Willard released the bird once more, letting it roam the misty swamplands in its eternal quest for nourishment. A crumbling road wove through the heart of the town, dividing 2 lines of weary habitation units, each worn by the march of time. The metallic walls, scarred by rust at every seam, bore patchwork plates hastily riveted to their exteriors, standing as sentinels of neglect. Above, the sky brooded, a foreboding dark blue as rain clouds massed, mirroring the somber soul of the city. "Not what I was expecting," Burke said with a hint of sarcasm. "Hey, Willard," I inquired with a spark of curiosity. "Has this place always been?" I hesitated, the right word eluding me. "So, somber?" I finally ventured, my voice tinged with a hint of uncertainty. Willard turned to follow my gaze at the encircled buildings, taken back by their withered condition. "Ah," he mused, his eyes shifting with sudden understanding. "This place was not always so forsaken." His face morphed into the wistful countenance of someone lost in the labyrinth of cherished memories. "Come 'ere dis way," he continued, beckoning us to follow him. "Let's us get to dat dear taverns for some drinks." He pointed to a habitat unit on the edge of a lively market. The stalls stood tattered and worn, their makeshift roofs barely holding together as merchants peddled all manner of peculiar goods. Desperation clung to the air like an unwelcome fog. The dull roar of haggling voices created a cacophonous symphony, while patrolling patrons weaved through the market like restless phantoms. As I neared the building, an intoxicating aroma of baked fish and beans wafted through the air, teasing my senses. In stark contrast to the bland protein rations I was accustomed to, the tantalizing scent of freshly prepared food sparked a deep hunger, my stomach rumbling with eager anticipation to indulge in the exotic flavors of this culture's cuisine. The building was a cavernous expanse, a single immense room with an alcove on the far side set up as a bar. This bar was attended by a charismatic man, his attire impeccably smooth and as rhythmic as a jazz melody. The room teemed with patrons seated at tables of varying shapes and sizes, all engaged in lively chatter, their laughter mingling with the clinking of glasses. Tucked away in a distant corner, a lone table stood, cluttered with used dishes and remnants of past indulgences. Willard threaded his way through the throng, finally arriving at the table. With practiced ease, he swept the spent dishes aside, creating a clear space for us to sit and unravel the early morning. Burke's eyes flitted restlessly around the room, his voice as tense as a drawn bowstring, as he remarked, "Isn't it strange that, at this hour, everyone isn't already up and toiling away?" Willard surveyed the room, seeming as much an outsider as we were. Their faces were scrubbed clean, yet their clothes bore marks of grime and hasty mending. He turned back to answer. "Dis 'ere is the night guard crew. They protect the town limits from the swamp creatures." He leaned back in his chair, letting the weight of his body be supported by the chair. A man strode toward the table, casually tossing a datapad alongside 3 metal cans, identical to the ones Willard had handed us earlier in his secluded shack. Their purpose well known to us, Burke and I adeptly revealed the concealed nipples, eagerly sipping the mysterious contents. "Those aren't complimentary," Willard remarked, his eyes narrowing as he observed our eager consumption. "Yous be havin' to pay for dem." I extracted a shimmering handful of Tigiri credits from my pocket, their gleam instantly capturing Willard's attention. "Tigiri credits?" he murmured, astonishment mingled with curiosity etched across his face. Questions spilled from him like a breached dam. You's come from de battle lines, haven't yous? Tell me, how fares de war? What is Tegiri like these days? Do you serves one of dear mighty corporations? Burke let out a dry chuckle at the final query. Mighty corporations? He echoed, a skeptical smirk curling at the corners of his lips. Willard's portrayal of the corrupt conglomerate that governed Tegiri seemed almost laughable. The only thing mighty about those corporations is their insatiable hunger for power and wealth. A sly grin unfurled across my lips at Burke's remark. I fished a handful of credits from my palm and scattered them on the table. Tegiri is but a ghost of its former trade glory. War weaves its tendrils far and wide, even reaching this forsaken haven, it appears. Willard retrieved the credits from the table. War? He questioned. What makes you think this place is affected by the war? Burke gently set the canned goods on the table, his eyes distant as he drifted into a reverie. I was stationed here during my deployment with the Republic Corps about a decade ago, he murmured, a subtle warmth softening his features. Serving under Lord Lysander, I remember him well. He met his end in the war that very year, a somber period etched into my memory forever. Willard placed the credits back on the table. You be recalling that right, he said. A great lord, people believed in his leadership, which generated a strong economy through trade. He twisted the can's lid and drew a sip to wet his throat before continuing. In his passing, his daughter took over, Countess Isadora. He paused, recalling the history. With the death of her father, many of the merchants didn't believe in the Countess. She was young, inexperienced, and up to that moment, only known for her father's name. Enlighten me, I urged, inching closer with intent. By what arcane process does the Republic select its lords? Surely there must be a way to challenge her dominion, a champion whom the people truly trust to usurp her reign. Burke locked eyes with a local who had noticed their credits. Swiftly, he swiped them into his hand and concealed them beneath the table. General Vikrin is the Countess's cousin, Burke said, flashing a smile at the stranger's inquisitive gaze. I don't understand, I replied. Why is that important? Burke laughed heartily. I forget that you're still a stranger to the tangled web of our republic's politics. A gentle chuckle danced on his lips before he continued. You see, lords are appointed by the republic courts. Each candidate must hail from the hallowed line of royalty. Pausing to savor a sip, he smiled, relishing the delightful flavor. If another of royal blood dares to challenge, they must command the favor of the court's majority. Let me guess, I interjected before Burke could finish. General Vikrin has the courts in his pocket? I ended on a questioning lilt. Willard's grin widened at my speculative leap. Yous ain't much of a republic man if yous don't know about them lords. A soft laugh escaped me. I can't say I support their style of warfare. Burke slung a heavy arm around my shoulders, his hand landing on my chest with a robust thud. Cyrus here has a lot more than just a few disagreements with the Republic. 6 figures swept into the room from the entrance, their presence muffling the chatter of the crowded patrons. One of them advanced, and the crowd parted like water, creating a path as he wove his way to the bar. He wore a crisp tan blouse with a bold red stripe running down the middle, adorned with a row of brass buttons. The red-collared blouse was neatly parted at the center, and black epaulettes attached with brass buttons gleamed on his shoulders. A brown belt cinched the blouse tightly around his waist, secured by a shiny brass buckle. The cuffs were red too, each fastened with a brass button. On his head he wore a red hat with a brass cross perched above a short black brim. Burke sighed softly. Well, this is unexpected. Who are these people? I asked, puzzled by their sudden appearance. Recruiters, Burke replied, nodding towards the one cutting through the crowd. Look at that one's emblem on his upper sleeve near the shoulder. The sleeve bore an emblem, the Countess's family crest centered around a cross beneath a single yellow bar. All right, I said. What about it? Burke's eyes were riveted to the scene before him as he softly narrated. That's a knight lieutenant. He's summoning families to serve in the Republic Corps. Things are about to get interesting. Follow my lead, and I'll fill you in later. His voice became a hushed murmur, blending with the growing stillness in the room. I turned my attention to the figures standing by the entrance. their armor forbidding and imposing. A black underlayer was clad in white and red metal plating over vital areas. A short, rounded collar jutted up from the chest plate, guarding the neck. Their helmets were white, with two sleek points swept back. The faceplates were black, with a thin, red glass spanning the eyes. It was futuristic knight's armor, designed for space. "What about those armored figures there?" Willard spoke up, his voice heavy. "Those be soldiers," he turned to me, his face etched with hidden sorrow. "Those soldiers," Burke continued, "are here to make sure the people called upon don't run." The young knight gracefully ascended the table in front of him, drawing every eye in the room like iron to a magnet. "Everyone, please." His voice was a silken thread weaving through the air, calm and commanding. "Take a seat or kneel where you stand." As the crowd obediently settled, he resumed with measured patience. "As you know, this is a call to arms. When your name is called, rise and join my men at the entrance for further instructions." He extended a confident arm, highlighting the 5 armored sentinels who stood like statues, eyes gleaming under their visors. As he called out the first name, a middle-aged woman rose from a booth at the heart of the dimly lit room. The crowd erupted in a symphony of jubilant chaos. Some pounded their fists on the tables in thunderous rhythm, others let loose sharp, triumphant whistles, and the remainder offered spirited applause. The moment caused the hair on my neck to stand as a tingle rippled down my neck and into extremities ending at my fingertip. Burke nudged me with his elbow, urging me to join in the clamor. The young man on the table waited patiently for the uproar to subside before announcing the next name. Once again, the room exploded with cheers. Name after name, individuals emerged from their shadowed nooks and crannies, marching toward the armored soldiers amidst the fervent celebration. A dozen were called in total. Chaperoned by the ironclad guards, they assembled into a line, shoulder to shoulder. Less than half were middle-aged or older, while the rest appeared barely beyond their early 20s. The eldest wore a stern mask of pride, whereas the younger faces reflected a mosaic of sorrow and staunch resolve. The young knight extended a sweeping gesture toward the men and women standing shoulder to shoulder. "Take a moment to honor your fellow citizens," he proclaimed, his eyes locking onto theirs with magnetic intensity. The crowd responded with another electrifying cheer. He lifted his data tablet once more, his voice steady as he delivered a premeditated address. "The Countess expresses her profound gratitude to each of you who answered the call to arms today. Your courage, bravery, and valor will be the foundation of the Republic's triumph. In recognition of your devotion, a stipend equaling 4 years of service will be sent to your estate from the moment you embark from the starport. I thank you all for your unwavering cooperation. May the Father's blessing shield each of you." With those parting words, he descended and walked past each individual with unbreakable resolve. As the group left the building, a final send-off of cheers roared from the crowd. Willard turned to look at me with a sorrow smile. "May the Father's blessing shield them indeed," he murmured. As the crowd resumed nursing their food and drinks, Burke quietly proposed our departure and slid the credits he had just swiped back onto the table. Willard paused for a moment before speaking. Maybe I should be covering this one." He smoothly swapped the credits on the table with his own. I tilted my head in puzzlement at his unexpected gesture. Sensing my confusion, he explained, "Your Taygiri credits ain't worth much here," Burke interjected. "If our Taygiri credits are useless, how are we supposed to buy the parts we need?" Willard, ready with an answer, replied, "I knows the place that'll take your credits, though." He hesitated briefly. "The parts might be marked as stolen." Burke dismissed the concern with a wave of his hand. "We're no strangers to dealing with shady folks." I shrugged at his words. "We don't have many choices. We need the parts." "Lead the way, Willard." He expertly guided us through the bustling market, threading past vibrant habitation units brimming with life. The air was a symphony of tantalizing scents, the savory allure of cooked food, the comforting aroma of freshly baked goods, and the sharp hint of adult beverages, all beckoning in unison. Suddenly, Burke's communicator emitted a piercing chirp, a burst of static, and an indecipherable message. The cacophony of the market swallowed any discernible sound. Willard halted, intrigued by the noise. With deft fingers, Burke retrieved the device from his belt, tinkering with the settings to clear the interference. As the second wave of messages crackled through, two words emerged with stark clarity: union and contact. Around us, the lively chatter of local patrons dimmed, their conversations fading into whispers as they caught the significant words, leaving an eerie stillness in their wake. A deafening wail of sirens overtook the bustling market, slicing through the air with a jarring abruptness. Willard turned to us, eyes wide, confusion etching his weathered face, ready to voice a question when an explosion and accompanying tremors rocked the market. Above, two patrol vessels streaked past, their blistering speeds leaving sonic booms in their wake. Shoppers clutched their ears in agony. Gazing upward, I watched as a Republic destroyer burned a fiery trail, descending through the atmosphere like a harbinger of doom. An eerie silence fell upon the market, an anticipatory hush that froze us all. "We're under attack," a voice cried out from the throng. The insidious tendrils of fear seeped into the crowd, transforming the energetic market into a chaotic sea of panic. People fled in all directions, a maelstrom of frantic movement. Towering above the crowd, Burke's massive frame cleaved a path through the chaos. Patrons collided with him, rebounding as if they had struck an immovable object. He pointed decisively to a stall. "Cyrus, there!" Grabbing Willard's arm, I pulled him close. "I got you, old man," I hollered above the tumult. Despite his age, Willard demonstrated surprising agility, weaving through the stampede with a tenacity that belied his years. Following in Burke's wake, we darted quickly through the parted crowd. Reaching the stall, we vaulted over the counter and huddled in the empty booth. The sirens wailed on relentlessly. I glanced at Willard. He was breathing hard, eyes scanning our surroundings, taking in the unfolding disaster. "Union attack?" he questioned, disbelief tinging his voice. "Here? Impossible," he muttered, shaking his head. Turning to Burke, I asked, "What was that last message?" Pressing the device to his ear, he repeated the fragments. "Union, signal, in contact, do not return." Willard glanced between us, bewilderment plain on his face. "What in the swamp's fresh hells is going on?" he exclaimed. From the sky, twin troop transports glided down like predatory birds, alighting on the market's periphery. The belly of each vessel yawned open, disgorging a flood of knights clad in armor that gleamed ominously under the sun. Brandishing long laser muskets, these warriors fanned out with practiced precision, herding the gathered throng with an ironclad resolve. They moved methodically through the sea of faces, their presence a chilling harbinger of control. Burke surveyed the chaotic scene, his eyes flicking from one detail to another. "Well, it's obvious," he remarked. Turning to lock eyes with me, "We're in a bit of a pickle." A mischievous grin tugged at my lips. "Is this another one of your clever recruitment ploys?" I teased. Willard's face was a portrait of baffled horror. "We's under attack, and all you folks can do is crack jokes?" I turned his way, a soothing smile playing on my lips. "My dear Willard, I assure you we are not under attack," I said calmly. The comm device buzzed to life, spitting static before a clear message broke through. "Being boarded. Republic troops have seized the ship. Do not return." Willard's face contorted with mounting bewilderment. "This ain't real," he muttered, a tinge of desperation coloring his voice. I drew my laser musket, scrutinizing the energy cartridge. 2 faint red marks on the glass meter. I discarded it and retrieved a fresh cartridge from my holster, its 4 tally marks glowing with a dull crimson. Hesitating briefly, I loaded it into the musket's chamber. Peering over the counter, I saw the knights sweeping the market with ruthless efficiency. It wouldn't be long before they reached us. Fighting wasn't an option. We needed another escape route. I secured the cartridge and holstered my weapon. "Willard," I inquired, "how close is the place you were leading us to?" "What?" he stammered, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Yeah, just down that street to the right," he said, pointing to a fork in the bustling market. Peeking once more, I saw a torrent of panicked people headed our way. Turning to Burke, who was poised for action, I gestured to the fleeing crowd. "We'll use them as cover." Burke shifted to Willard's side, clapping him on the shoulder. "Time to hustle." He hoisted Willard over his shoulder and leaped over the counter, blending seamlessly into the throng. I followed closely, weaving through the frantic mass until we emerged onto a deserted street. Willard huffed as he was jostled like a sack of grain on Burke's shoulder. "Put me down, you giant," he hollered. Burke obliged with a smirk, carefully setting him on his feet. Willard clutched his midsection where Burke's grip had been. I turned to Willard. "We need to get out of the market streets," I said, my voice steady. "Get us to the place you mentioned, and we'll handle the rest." Willard eyed Cyrus up and down suspiciously before asking, "You twos ain't just travelers, are ya?" He glanced around at the chaos unfolding. "Union infiltrators. That's what you really are." His voice dripped with a mixture of fear and realization. Burke let out a hearty laugh. "I assure you, we're not Union scum." He placed a reassuring hand on Willard's shoulder. "If it helps, we steal from the Union." "Steal from the Union?" Willard echoed, confusion knitting his brow. He shook his head, desperately trying to piece the puzzle together. Suddenly, realization dawned like a lightning bolt, illuminating his wide eyes. "Pirates! You're pirates!" he gasped. I met his gaze, smirking slightly. "Would you prefer we be Union infiltrators?" Willard surged ahead, scanning the shadowy corners of the street. "Those sirens, they warn of Union raids. They only wail when a Union vessel is near." I instantly grasped the situation. Our stolen cargo was the sole piece of equipment still pulsing with Union signals, unwashed and dangerously exposed. Burke and I shadowed Willard down a cobblestone street, nearing a time-worn edifice that seemed to hold 1,000 untold tales. As we veered around the corner, 8 armored knights, their steel gleaming under the dim streetlight, emerged as an imposing phalanx. "You there," one knight's voice boomed, authority echoing in his tone. "Freeze where you stand." His gauntlet-clad finger cut through the air, aimed directly at us. 2 knights broke formation and stalked forward. "Hands out at your sides, palms up." Willard's hands shot up instinctively, while Burke and I followed, our movements deliberate and measured. Suddenly, another pair of knights materialized behind us, their muskets trained on us, the barrels cold and unyielding. One of the first 2 knights reached for my holstered musket, deftly ejecting the cartridge before securing it to his own belt. Shifting his attention back to me, he patted my jacket, rummaging for hidden items. Finding none, he nodded to the knight behind me. I felt a firm hand clasp my shoulder, then delve into my pockets, producing a few personal effects. Among them, several Tagiri credits tumbled to the ground. "Sergeant," the knight behind me spoke, holding out a handful of credits. The sergeant stepped closer, scrutinizing the credits with a discerning eye. "Tagiri, so you're off-worlders?" His gaze pierced through me, seeking answers. "Yes, sir," I replied curtly. "How long have you been planet-side?" His eyes probed deeper, hunting for lies. "Just a day or 2, I responded, keeping my voice steady. He paused, his eyes searching mine for deceit. "Corporal, secure his hands." He commanded the knight behind me. Strong hands gripped mine, binding them with cufflinks behind my back. "Wait, what?" I protested. "I've done nothing wrong." Without glancing back, the sergeant addressed my outburst. "You just lied to a knight of the Republic under the Countess's banner." I knew better than to say more. Futility would only tighten the noose around my fate. I watched as he searched Burke, producing a communicator. He drew forth a device of his own, placing the communicator, which began scanning the device, decoding the encrypted signatures. His device chimed in alarm, a message flashing on the screen. "Well, at least you're not Union scum," he remarked with a sly grin. He lifted the device, scrutinizing it with narrowed eyes. "However, this is registered as stolen property, linked to a notorious criminal wanted across the Republic." With a sharp gesture, he signaled to the knights looming behind him. They advanced with unsettling precision, seizing Burke, Willard, and me. "Detain them," he commanded, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "The Countess will undoubtedly wish to question them herself." The sergeant sauntered up to Willard, his eyes narrowing as they swept over him. "What's your tale? You don't seem like an off-worlder," he mused, suspicion lacing his voice. "Just a humble swamp dweller," Willard protested, trying to sound nonchalant. But the sergeant's expression twisted into a scoff as he pulled out more Tagiri credits from Willard's pockets. Raising a hand, the sergeant traced a deliberate circle in the air. "Evacuate the detainees," he commanded, his tone brokering no argument. At the end of the street, a troop transport descended with a distant hum, its belly yawning open to reveal a lone sentinel, poised to welcome both the unit and their unexpected guest. The ship ascended majestically above the bustling town, revealing a scene teeming with military precision below. The sergeant's commands crackled through the intercom, their urgency muffled by the roar of the engines. Beside them, a patrol vessel sidled into escort position, its engines emitting a guttural roar reminiscent of a predatory beast, sending deep vibrations through my body. The sergeant gestured to the sentinel, who responded with a swift, forceful punch to a button. Instantly, the view transformed as a shutter door slid into place, muting the cacophony to a distant hum. 3 narrow vertical viewports offered scant glimpses of the terrain beneath. As the town shrank from sight, the landscape below morphed once again into an expanse of eerie, glistening swamplands. The sergeant turned to Burke, raising a data pad that glowed a ghostly blue. Through the transparent screen, I watched as it started compiling facial features. A series of intricate algorithms sifted through an exhaustive list of names. Suddenly, a younger version of Burke's face materialized on the screen, with the word deceased emblazoned across the top in bold letters. The sergeant's eyes flicked rapidly between the screen and Burke, a look of doubt clouding his face briefly before he moved on to scan me. The screen flashed multiple silhouettes before locking onto a void frame branded with unidentifiable in stark text. When the scanner pivoted to Willard, it instantly conjured his profile, his face clear and unambiguous. Turning to another sentinel, the sergeant exchanged hushed words. Glancing back at me, their expressions oozed judgment. He tapped the datapad a few times before linking to the intercom system. This time, his words sliced through the ambient muffled sounds with clarity. "Count 3 detainees. Notify Countess for 2 detainees," he said, his voice laden with practiced code. We teetered on the brink of an encounter with the one soul we had desperately sought to evade. With bated breath and hearts pounding, our destinies now dangled precariously over the abyss, praying that the Countess would grace us with her mercy.